What if the silence you fear is the very thing that will set you free? What if solitude isn't your weakness, but the doorway to your unshakable power? And what if, instead of being a man who seeks noise, you became the man who commands it by mastering the quiet? You wake up, no buzz, no plans, no notifications lighting up your screen, just stillness, just you. And at first, that silence feels unnatural, maybe even threatening. There's a strange weight in the quiet, like the walls are closing in. Then it happens, the whisper of doubt creeps in. A tension presses against your chest, not because you crave company, but because you long for proof that you matter to someone. That's when most men break. They reach for their phones. They text people they shouldn't. They scroll mindlessly, desperate for any form of connection. Society has programmed you to believe that silence means something is wrong, that if no woman is messaging, if no friend is calling, you must be falling behind, becoming irrelevant, or worse, unlovable. But what if that's a lie? What if silence isn't a punishment but an opportunity, a doorway most men never dare to open? See, you were trained to fear being alone, to treat solitude like a problem that needs solving, but no one prepared you for what happens when you embrace it. When you stop chasing noise and finally confront what lies beneath it, you unlock a power that can't be faked. The man who chooses solitude, who walks alone not because he has to, but because he wants to, that man isn't weak. He's dangerous. He's building something that no one else sees. Something internal. Something that cannot be shaken. And here's the truth. This message isn't for every man. It's for the one who's tired of coming in last, tired of shrinking himself to fit into places he's already outgrown. It's for the man who is done performing for approval, done running, and ready to rise. In a world that rewards noise, validation, and attention-seeking, the man who dares to be still becomes unforgettable. This isn't isolation, it's reclamation. You're not escaping life, you're finally returning to it. Too many men bounce from woman to woman, job to job, shallow connection to shallow connection, chasing validation like air. But have you ever stopped to ask, what happens if you stop chasing? What if you sit still and meet yourself? That's when everything begins to shift. Your thoughts sharpen, your voice deepens, your standards rise. And here's the paradox. The moment you no longer need others to see your worth, that's when they finally notice. But before we go any further, I want you to do one thing. Go to the comments and write this. I choose solitude to forge my strength. Not because it sounds poetic, but because you've reached a point where you're done hiding. You're ready to stop running and start becoming. This is your moment of truth, your line in the sand. Type it, own it, and let's begin. You've made the declaration, this is your line in the sand. But now comes the test. Will you keep walking forward, even when the silence gets heavier? You postponed becoming the man you once promised yourself you'd be. You made commitments in the dark, whispered dreams into your own mind, then tucked them away, hoping time would soften their echo. But time has a way of circling back. And suddenly, all those moments return uninvited, unfiltered. That girl who vanished without a goodbye. That job you never dared to apply for. That goal you swore you'd chase when no one was watching. Now they stand in front of you, demanding your attention. And this time, there's no place to run, no conversation to hide behind, no relationship to use as cover, no performance to act out for applause. There's just you and the truth you've been dodging for years. So here it is, the real question. Will you face what's been waiting, or will you retreat once more? That's why so many men keep moving. They don't stay busy to grow, they stay busy to avoid. From one woman to another, from one goal to the next, from screen to screen, task to task, not to build, but to escape. Not from her, not from them, but from themselves. Because silence strips you bare. It tears away the mask. And in that moment, you either break or awaken. In the beginning, silence is brutal. It presses down on your chest like a weight you can't shake. Every insecurity you buried comes roaring to the surface. You're not enough. You'll be forgotten. Nothing you do truly matters. But if you resist the urge to ruin, if you breathe through the ache and sit in the discomfort, something begins to change. You start to realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable. And those dark thoughts, they aren't you, they're echoes, ghosts of old scripts that no longer fit. They may knock at your door, but you don't have to answer. That's when clarity arrives, not with a bang, but with a whisper. You begin to know deeply that you are not your past, not your mistakes, not the woman who left, not the man who fell. You are the one who stayed, the one who didn't flinch, the one who faced the storm and refused to look away. And that right there is where power is born. That's stoic growth. It doesn't begin in the gym or in books or in self-help videos. It begins in stillness. It begins the moment you finally decide to face yourself. You sit in the storm, let it scream. Let it twist and tear away every illusion you clung to. And still you remain. You don't run, you don't numb. You let the void exist. And in doing so, you reclaim something most men never find: inner command. Out of that silence, a new voice begins to rise. Not loud, not perfect, but steady and real. When you speak again, your words carry weight. When you move with intention. Not because you've conquered the world, but because you've come back to yourself. And here's what no one tells you. The world doesn't need more men who blend in. It needs men who can sit in silence and rise with clarity. Men who don't chase attention, don't beg to be seen, don't perform for validation. Because the man who owns his presence doesn't need to be loud. His energy doesn't ask, it declares. But once you stop needing to be seen, something remarkable happens. Your presence speaks for itself. And now, we face the next silent trap: approval. It's not as loud as addiction, but it's just as consuming. You pick up your phone and scroll. Did she reply? Did anyone like your last post? Did anyone notice you? On the surface, it feels harmless. But underneath, it's something deeper. It's neediness dressed as connection, dependency with a smile. And what makes it so dangerous is how quietly it takes over. No one tells you to watch out for this. There's no rehab for approval, no intervention. But it creeps into your life, slowly and steadily, until it begins to reshape the way you think about yourself. Approval seeking doesn't just influence what you do, it alters your identity. You start to shrink. You say yes when everything inside you wants to scream no. You laugh when something isn't funny. You avoid silence because silence might expose your truth. You avoid honesty because it might lead to rejection. You avoid standing alone because it feels too vulnerable. And you convince yourself that you're being smart, cautious. But in reality, you're not playing safe. You're playing small. You trade your voice for temporary comfort. You give up your identity for the sake of applause. You sacrifice your freedom just to feel like you belong. And over time, the desire to be liked becomes a cage. You hang compliments on the walls to make it feel cozy, but deep down, you know you're stuck trapped in an image others created for you, not the man you were meant to become. Here's the truth. Approval is a high. It comes fast. It feels good, but it fades. And like any high, once it wears off, you crave more. More attention, more validation, more performance. And eventually, you burn out. Not because you're weak, but because you've been pretending too long. And pretending is exhausting. The mask gets heavy. But there's a different way. It's not easy, but it's real. It starts with a detox and approval detox. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop bending your values to fit the room. You begin asking harder questions. Am I doing this because I believe in it or because I want to be liked? That single question is a turning point. You stop chasing the easy yes. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop explaining yourself to people who never truly listened. At first, it feels like withdrawal. There's distance, there's silence. The voice in your head whispers, what if they don't like me anymore? But you sit in it. You breathe through it. You let the discomfort sharpen you. And slowly, a different voice appears. Not dramatic, not loud, but grounded, solid, yours. The one buried beneath years of performing. The one that doesn't speak to be liked, but speaks because it has something to say. Then something shifts. You stop sending texts just to stay relevant. You stop fake laughing. You begin to honor your time, your truth, your peace. And people notice. They sense it. There's weight in your presence. There's calm in your eyes. You no longer chase attention, you carry it. That's the paradox. When you stop trying to be noticed, you become unforgettable. Because men who beg to be accepted disappear into the crowd. But the man who chooses himself, he stands out not through volume, but through alignment. He knows what he believes. He knows what he allows. And most importantly, he knows who he is when no one's watching. When you stop seeking validation and start choosing yourself, a new path opens soon that leads not to applause, but to clarity. The kind of man who lives in alignment with himself doesn't need to be loud to be remembered. He's unshakable. But make no mistake, this approval detox isn't clean or easy. It's messy. It costs you. You lose the fake friends. You shed the surface level smiles. You walk away from the temporary applause. But what you gain, it's everything. You gain respect, not the kind you demand, but the kind that flows toward you naturally. You gain peace not by hiding, but by standing firm. And you gain power not by controlling others, but by seeing yourself clearly. So now you must ask, are you still living to be liked? Are you still molding yourself to make others feel more comfortable? Or are you finally ready to stop adjusting and start becoming who you really are? Because once you truly choose yourself, everything begins to shift. You no longer chase attention. You no longer explain your worth. You stop performing. You simply become. And the world can't help but notice. That's when clarity arrives through solitude. At some point, every man reaches a place where the noise dies down. Not because life gets quieter, but because he stops turning up the volume. In that quiet, something powerful begins to emerge. For the first time in a long time, the fog clears not because the world has changed, but because you've stepped away from it. You've turned down the noise, the opinions, the expectations, the pressure. And what's left is the one voice you'd been ignoring all along, your own. Solitude isn't a curse. It's restoration. It's not about cutting yourself off. It's about peeling back everything that was never you, so you can finally see what is. In chaos, you react, you rush, you perform, you measure your worth through someone else's standards. But in solitude, something shifts. You begin to slow down. You start observing instead of reacting. You start noticing what you're letting into your mind, your schedule, your spirit. And suddenly, you realize most of your goals weren't even yours. The life you've been chasing, it wasn't built for you. Even your idea of success was handed to you, pre-packaged by someone else. And so, you've spent years running toward a finish line that never felt like home. But when you step back, when the feed goes silent, when your phone stays face down, when your weekend isn't booked out just to feel busy, that's when something new arises. Clarity. You begin to ask better questions. Not, what do people expect of me? But, what do I really want? What lifts me up? What drains me? Who do I become around certain people? And do I even like that version of myself? Solitude gives you space to face those questions without the pressure to answer quickly, without the urge to impress, without needing anyone's approval. You sit in the silence. You feel what's been buried. You breathe through what makes you uncomfortable. And then, little by little, the mirror begins to clear. You stop pretending things are fine when they aren't. You stop accepting hollow relationships. You stop lying to yourself just to avoid discomfort. And in that space, you begin to live aligned not perfectly, but honestly. You start saying no without guilt. You carve out space not because you're cold, but because for the first time, you're becoming truly clear. Once you begin living with clarity, you naturally start releasing anything misaligned with who you truly are. You no longer cut ties from bitterness, but from understanding. Solitude doesn't just clear your thoughts, it sharpens your vision. You become deliberate. You no longer wake up just to survive another day, you wake up with purpose. Your routines reflect your goals. Your inner circle mirrors your values. Your environment no longer tries to impress others, it simply reveals who you become. And with this shift, something powerful happens. You stop explaining your decisions to people who never truly listened in the first place. You don't argue. You don't defend. You just live and your life begins to speak for itself. That's the moment you realize you're no longer available for drama. You're no longer vulnerable to manipulation. You're no longer shaken by surface-level noise. You're rooted, and that rootedness makes you unmovable. People might disagree with you. Some might misunderstand you. Others might walk away entirely. But none of that can pull you off center because you're not living to please them anymore. You're living in full alignment with the man you were meant to be. That's the true gift of solitude. It strips away distraction. It burns off the noise. It dissolves every version of you that was never truly yours to begin with. And what remains is a man with calm in his chest and purpose in his stride. He doesn't speak to impress, speaks because his words carry meaning. He doesn't chase hay builds. He doesn't beg to be understood because finally he understands himself. So if the world around you feels quiet right now, don't panic. That silence isn't a void, it's an invitation. It's your life whispering, slow down and listen. You don't need more attention. You don't need more likes, more messages, more validation. What you need is stillness. Solitude. Moments where you sit with yourself and rediscover the man you've ignored for far too long. The man who walks alone isn't broken, he's rebuilding. He's not running from life, he's returning to his center. He's refining, strengthening, burning away everything that doesn't belong. He doesn't move like someone waiting to be chosen. He moves like someone who has already chosen himself. And when that shift happens, when you truly become that man, life begins to respond. The right people stay. The wrong ones disappear. An opportunity no longer needs to be hunted, it simply finds you. That's not luck. That's not magic. That's mastery. If something deep inside you stirred while listening to this, don't just scroll. Take a moment, ask yourself, what's one distraction you're ready to release today? Then drop it in the comments below. Hit like not for entertainment, but because something in you awakened. And if you're ready to build not noise, not approval, but clarity, discipline, and quiet strengths, subscribe now. Explore our playlist, Stoic Wisdom, Mastering Emotions and Inner Strength. Because here at the Stoic Room, we don't chase validation. We forge men who lead from within. Stay grounded, stay focused, and keep walking the Stoic path.